Hello and welcome to this episode of 5-Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green, and this is a special episode that we are recording at an evening session. And many of you who know me know that's very rare for me. But we have a special announcement this evening, and I have two very special guests who are joining me. First, I want to introduce Chief Bruce Varner. Chief Varner began his fire service career with the Phoenix, Arizona Fire Department in 1967, promoting to Deputy Chief in '85. He has professional fire service experience through all ranks to the position of Fire Chief. He served as Fire Chief in Carrollton, Texas from 1992 to 2004, Fire Chief in Santa Rosa, California, 2004 to 2010. Experience as a program manager, instructor, lecturer, member and chair of NFPA Fire Service Standards Committees. He's named Fire Chief Magazine Career Fire Chief of the Year in 2001. Received Chief Fire Officer Accreditation in 2003, renewed in 2007 and 2010. The chief retired from Santa Rosa Fire Department on December 30th of 2010. Post-retirement includes instructor and consulting work, principal at B.H. Varner and Associates. Previously served as an advisor to UCLA Phaser Team and an SME on the Glancer project with DHS and S&T directed projects. A member of the NFPA Protective Clothing and Equipment Project since 1985. In March 2009, he was a team member for a study of fire service in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. In December of 2011, he received the Blue Card Incident Commander Instructor Certification. Awarded fellow grade membership in the Institution of Fire Engineers in January 2012, and companion fellow by IFE Board of Directors in March 2016. In 2014, he was appointed to and participated in the National Academies of Science panel on review of the engineering laboratory at the NIST, FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, Master Instructor Traffic Management, Train the Trainer Program. Pro Board certified as Fire Department Incident Safety Officer and Fire Department Health Safety Officer. Instructor for HSO, ISO, and PPE Technician. Principal Organizer of IFE Asia Pacific Forum in 2016 in San Diego. Elected to the IFE International Board Member and Trustee in 2017, and IFE International President from 2019 to 2020. He holds OSHA General Industry Trainer Certification. He remains on the IFE International Board as immediate past president until November of this year. Is currently serving as business manager for the IFE USA branch and co-chair for the announcement for this evening. Our other guest is Chief Dennis Rubin. Chief Rubin was first appointed as a fire chief in December of 1996. His experience spans more than 30 years. He has served as a line firefighter, company officer, command officer, and chief of the department in several major U.S. cities. In 1994, Chief Rubin was the president of the State Fire Chiefs Association of Virginia. He hosted the 1999 Southeastern Fire Chiefs Association Conference held in Dothan, Alabama. He was appointed to several committees with the International Association of Fire Chiefs, including a 2-year term as the Safety Committee and Program Committee chairs. Chief Rubin is the ad hoc chair for the Wingspread conferences. Chief Rubin's educational accomplishments include a Bachelor of Science degree in Fire Administration from the University of Maryland, an Associates of Applied Science degree in Fire Science Management from Northern Virginia Community College. The chief is a graduate of the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer Program and the Naval Postgraduate School's Executive Leadership course in Homeland Security. The chief is a certified emergency manager and a certified incident safety officer, as well as he has obtained the Chief Fire Officer designation and Chief Medical Officer designation bestowed by the Center for Public Safety Excellence. Chief Rubin's teaching credentials are significant. He is an adjunct faculty member with several state fire rescue training agencies and at the National Fire Academy. Chief Rubin is a popular lecturer at local, state, national, and international venues. He has been a member of 7 National Fire Academy course development teams. Included among the development teams that the chief has served on are Incident Command, Infection Control for the Fire Service, and Tactical Operations. Chief Rubin is the author of several emergency service textbooks. His first release is entitled Rube's Rules for Survival. This book is a collection of case studies dealing with the important topic of firefighter safety. The next book that the chief published was Rube's Rules for Leadership. The chief discusses his 13 core values and describes how each can be applied to improve one's personal leadership capabilities. Chief Rubin's third book, DC Fire, was released at the Fire Department Instructors Conference by Fire Engineering Books. Finally, he has just completed his 4th textbook, It's Always About Leadership. Watch for the national release of the Chief's newest textbook at FDIC. Chief Rubin contributes to several fire rescue service publications and has written more than 250 technical articles relating to fire rescue department operations, administration, training, and safety. The chief has 3 grown children and 1 grandson. He loves being outdoors and is an avid sports fan. Go Caps. Follow him on Twitter at Chief Rubin or find him on the web at www.chiefrubin.net and on Facebook at DC Fire, or you can contact him by email at chiefrubin@me.com. Chiefs, gentlemen, it's a pleasure and honor to welcome you to Fire Alarm Task Force. Thank you for your time this evening. Chief Varner, I'm going to toss it over to you as one of the leads on this announcement that we're going to be making this evening. So let's start and let's tell the masses what's going on and why we're here.
Okay. Well, certainly one of the things that came out of the last Wingspread conference, Wingspread VI, was a motion to move this to every 5 years. And when we look at the changing pace of technology, the changing pace of the world around us, it certainly did make sense. We certainly didn't spend a lot of time talking about having a pandemic that would shut the world down for a year and plus, still going, at the last one. So there's certainly some things that need to be looked at and discussed and brought forward. But let's talk a little bit about the history of Wingspread. The first Wingspread conference was held in 1966. As you read my bio, I joined the fire service in 1967. I probably read the report somewhere between 66 and 68, but I'm familiar with the report. I've followed every one of them. I've been very fortunate to participate in at least a couple of them. But looking at the people that came together for the very first one, what the heck was this all about? And I'm going to mention a couple of names, and these are names that if you're hearing these for the first time, Google them, look them up, because these were significant players in the fire service, significant players in the United States Fire Service history. William Clark, Madison, Wisconsin. He was also, I have to mention this, he was an Institution of Fire Engineers member, way ahead of us having a formalized United States branch, which didn't happen until, I believe, 1994. I'm just doing that off the top of my head. Donald Favreau, the Executive Director, Institute of Fire Administration, New York State University. David Gratz, Fire Chief, Silver Spring, Maryland, International Fire Administration Institute. John O'Hagan, Chief of Department, FDNY. Keith Royer at Iowa State University Extension Services, fire instructors. Lester Stick, Fire Chief in Davenport, Iowa. Henry Smith out of Texas. And if you mention Henry Smith's name at A&M, people will bow in respect. Because Henry was very, very well known throughout the fire service, but in particular in Texas. Curtis Volkemer, Chief Fire Marshal, Chicago Fire Department. Keith Klinger, Chief Engineer, LA City Fire Department. Robert Byras, Director of Fire Service Training, the University of Maryland, College Park. Dennis probably knows that name because they probably absolutely had to learn it. The prof made sure you knew names like that, didn't he, Dennis?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So what brought these guys, these icons of the fire service at the time, together to do a report, an ad hoc committee of the Wingspread Conference on Fire Service Administration, Education, and Research? The Johnson Foundation is where Wingspread is located. Wingspread is a place. It's a Frank Lloyd Wright structure. It's been built onto to facilitate better conference facilities. And if you go look at the Johnson Foundation and Wingspread, at the topics that they've taken on over the years, we are humbled that they have taken on fire services is one of their topics. I mean, they look at pollution, they look at finance, they look at poverty, they look at big ticket items, but they've also allowed the name to be continued as the Wingspread Conference for Fire Service. And this will be the third time that they have hosted the event on their campus. And we are truly honored by that. You know, when we go back to this first one again, I'm gonna just read a couple of things. Unprecedented demands are being imposed on the fire services by rapid social and technological change. Sounds familiar. The public is complacent towards the rising trend of life and property lost by fire. Really? No kidding. The insurance interest has exerted a strong influence on the organization of the fire service. The dominance seems to be waning. The fire service must provide leadership in establishing realistic criteria for determining proper levels of fire protection. There's a serious lack of communication between the public and the fire service. The behavior patterns of the public have direct influence on the fire problem. Professional status begins with education. The Gordon Howell report suggests 4 criteria for defining a profession. The scope and degree of depth of educational requirements for efficient functioning of the fire service must be examined. Increased mobility at the executive level would be important to the achievement of professional status. Career development of the fire service executive must be systematic and deliberate. Governing bodies, municipal administrators generally do not recognize the need for executive development of the fire officer. Well, they certainly do today. Fire service labor and management, municipal officers, administrators must join together if professionalism is to become a reality. And the concept that fire protection is strictly a responsibility of local government must be re-examined. This was 1966. They're looking at the future. And you look at the changes that came out of this. And they're significant.
Tremendous.
The National Fire Academy, the basis is here in that first Wingspread report. America Burning, the basis is here in that first Wingspread report. So over the years, it's been groups of people. Now, I had the privilege of knowing Alan Brunacini sometime in about 1966 is where I first met him, and I was hanging around trying to turn 21 as fast as I could so I could take the Phoenix Fire Department test. And Bruno was a captain on Engine 1. He had read this report. He knew about this report. He thought it was significant. And one of his goals was to get invited to a future Wingspread conference, which he did. I don't believe it was the second one. I believe it was the third one. Dennis, you may even where he was invited, he participated. Some of these same people were still participating at the time. I know that Henry Smith was a mentor for Alan. A couple of the others that are there were mentors, were friends. But Alan was passionate about the fact that this needed to continue. And as it appeared that there wasn't going to be another one, he set about a plan to see that we did continue. Chief Rubin, you hosted Wingspread IV in Dothan, I believe?
I believe it was. I'm not sure the number, but I can tell you it was 1986. Chief Brunacini asked if I would take care of the logistics. And of course, the answer was yes, sir, without a doubt. And it was to come to pass. I think, though, I'm just going to take a couple of seconds and first of all say thanks to Steve for the wonderful invitation. 5 Alarm Task Force is amazing. This is an incredible medium for us to get messages out and for us to share it with folks. So, Steve, from both of Bruce and I, thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's my honor and pleasure, sir.
When it relates to Chief Varner, his name is on about everything in this business. He's a quiet giant. He gets mad at me when I say things like this, but it's amazing what he's done, what he's seen, where he's been, and how he's helped the business. He does not get enough credit. And again, our quiet giant. So I needed to get those two things out of the way. If you were to go back in time, and for me, I started a little bit later than Bruce. I'm still a kid, you know. The first fire chief that I worked for, love and honor him as well as the others. He was a high school graduate after the military through the GED process. The second fire chief I worked for, which again, probably shouldn't tell you the year, but it's been a little while, was the first high school graduate as a fire chief in my fire department, which started in 1871. So when you begin looking at these topics that Bruce has so eloquently described and try to put them into context, it's space age. It truly is. It's Amazon taking us to the moon as a balance, if you will, to what was going on in society at the time. Advanced education? What do you mean advanced education? One of the mayors in my great city said, give me a fire chief that's a fireman. Didn't even say firefighter. Of course, it was before it was popular. And I think it was always focused on blue collar, but yet comes along this group that Bruce again so eloquently described. And lo and behold, we're off and running, trying to forecast what that future looks like, trying to determine what the significant issues are, what's going to happen in America, not today, not tomorrow, but in our case, 5 years from now. And that's sort of tough to do.
Well, it's impossible. And like I said, when you and I talked just after the pandemic started, and we talked about the fact that, you know, emergency services, even though I've been out longer than a lot of guys have been in today, but we just didn't think of anything along this line. We thought of minimized local problems that we'd have to respond to, hazmat scenes, and some sort of contagious diseases in a small area. Nobody ever thought in the grand scheme of things, as Chief Varner said in his opening, that we were going to deal with a worldwide pandemic that closed the planet basically for over a year.
You know, my reaction to that is, I believe the last pandemic was 1917. Yeah. Easy for me to remember.
Spanish flu.
That's the year that my mother was born. So again, it makes it easy to connect. But I would say there were some folks who in the background had some of those discussions, but never really carried it through as to what the potential was, what the impact's going to be. And to understand that you couldn't go into a business, as Bruce has already described, for almost over a year to get a sandwich or to buy a shirt. Amazing, amazing. We're going to discuss what the pandemic looked like. We're going to discuss how to be prepared for the next one and what EMS looks like. And all that will come from, again, another person who is just actually one of the most excellent persons in emergency medical services today that heads up the Eagles. And that's Dr. James Augustine. I hope he's listening out there somewhere. What a great friend. What a great mentor.
Great guest.
And that's the quality and caliber of people that Johnson brings along. And in case you're wondering, what am I doing there? I'm still the logistics guy. You want a bottle of water?
Well, I think that, you know, having known you now since we started the podcast 5.5 years ago, and you were gracious enough to share not only the information of Wingspread VI, but to bring Chief Bruno on my show at that early time when I really did not know what I was doing. And you told me, you know, I told you I was kind of afraid to talk with him. And you said, Steve, he's just another firefighter. You're going to be talking across the kitchen table like you do with anybody else. And you were absolutely right. When you put him on the phone and he just said, Steve, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. Let's get talking.
Miss
And
him every day. And Bruce Varner was lucky enough to have him for almost an entire lifetime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I mentioned, I first met Bruno in like mid 1966, and was privileged to have him as a friend, as a mentor, as my fire chief. He was my fire service dad. I mean, absolutely miss him every
I
single.
think we all do. And I was very lucky that just last week, I had Chief John Vance as my guest, who works with the B Shifter website, and his two sons, who are carrying on their dad's tradition so wonderfully and beautifully, and in such an important way, with providing that great educational opportunities for firefighters to learn more, do more as firefighters, become officers, become command people, and really be the future, the leadership of the fire service, as some of us older people are kind of going, sliding out the other way on the tower. And to have people like the four of you on this show, and having grown up listening, reading Chief Bruno's articles in Firehouse Magazine from the very first issue that came into the volunteer firehouse I belonged to. And when you talk about first, I was the first college graduate to enter that small combination volunteer fire department in North Carolina. And it was, I didn't quite know why the chief was treating me so nicely. And a buddy, young kid I met at the meeting that we were voted in on, he was 18, I was 25. And yet here we are 40 some odd years, and he's still my best friend today. Took him under his wing back then.
And I think I may have heard that story. I believe you may have been the first member of Jewish faith as
yes,
well.
I was.
Which
Yeah, we
brought
both
another,
were. Yeah.
another whole learning opportunity.
Exactly, it did. And the wonderful thing was that it was a wonderful opportunity, because there was never a moment of hesitation on my part, or never lack of welcome by every single firefighter who was a member of that department. No questions were asked. As a matter of fact, some of them bent over backwards to accommodate my beliefs and tenets at the time. And I couldn't have loved them more as brothers than for doing that, and wanting to learn about what is it to keep kosher? Why do you keep kosher? What's it about? And we sat there at the kitchen table, and I taught. And that was probably the first opportunity that I really saw that I had something to contribute besides my physical body and my efforts as a firefighter in that department, was to continue being who I was. I was a teacher. I started teaching when I was 13 years old, 2 months after my own bar mitzvah. And I've never stopped, thank goodness. And I always look for every opportunity to teach. I still teach 2 adult classes today in Jewish thoughts and private bar mitzvah students. And I love doing it. My wife's still teaching. She started in her high school days as well. And it's so important to us, and to know that in that small department, I had the opportunity to share knowledge and learn also from them, so that we did have a homogeneous body, that we were firefighters together. That's who we were.
And my friend Bruce Varner's a little mashugana. I guarantee it. I want him to tell just one single story. Bruce, would you talk about when Chief Brunacini would share these stories? He would do it for my benefit. I would always get him a glass of iced tea first, but it would typically embarrass Bruce. And the 2 stories I love the most, one is probably too long, the Nash Rambler, but please tell us about the hairdryer. Just give us a snapshot about, please, Bruce, I'm begging you. I could do it, but not as well as you, and certainly nowhere near like the chief.
We'll do it. We'll do it very quick. Sitting in Bruno's living room, local engine company goes by. They blow through a stop sign. They didn't even slow down. He says, "Bruce, how fast were they going?" Being relatively intelligent, I said, "Too fast, Chief." I said, I was the safety officer at the time. I said, maybe we ought to look at that, at how we're driving fire trucks. I know some people at the cop shop. I borrowed a radar gun, and it took about a nanosecond for the word to get out around the department that the safety officer had a radar gun. And all I would do is if I was somewhere near a response route, when a call came in, I'd just pull over and wait, and I would look at how fast we were driving fire apparatus, and we were driving too fast. It resulted in some regulations and such. Well, the cops needed their radar gun back. It was a spare. I'd had it about 2 weeks, and they said, "Hey, give us our radar gun back." So I gave them their radar gun, but enough controversy had occurred around the department that I just went to the store and I bought a black hair dryer with one of those big diffusers on the end that looked like a radar gun. And we did another month and a half of the safety officer having a radar gun before somebody discovered that I really only had a hair dryer at that point. There were cartoons, there were comments, there were lots of things that took place, but we did write a comprehensive driving regulation requiring stops at negative right-of-way situations, and that's all over the country where people took it and just put their name on it. And Chief Brunacini was the impetus behind that occurring. And you look at the things that, Dennis gives me some credit for being involved in things. You look at things that Alan Brunacini touched. You look at his fingerprint on the U.S. Fire Service, frequently referred to as America's fire chief. He's the one that has kept Wingspread going. He caused that to happen. Dennis and I were logistically causing yet another one to happen. It'll be the first one to occur since Chief Brunacini's passing. Dennis has put me in the very prestigious and very awkward position of providing a tribute to Chief Brunacini at the start of that. And I'm very privileged is that I'm going to do that with his granddaughter, Alana Brunacini, who is a PhD psychologist who works with the fire service. And I can hear things that Alan would say come out of her mouth when she's talking about particular aspects. And again, I'm privileged to continue to be involved with the Brunacini family. You mentioned Blue Card and Nick and John, things that are going there. You also mentioned John Vance. What a radio voice that man has.
Yes.
And just a really brilliant individual. So you look at the people that come to the fire service, the people that really get involved with the fire service, and they are smart, capable people. They believe in education, they believe in learning, they're watching what's going on. And these are the kinds of people that we want to still continue to be involved. We want our youngsters to join us and bring their ideas forward. We want to know what they're thinking. Dr. Lori Moore does a presentation where she talks about the generations. If you haven't heard it, you need to hear it, because she talks about all of the generations. It's funny, it's to the point, and you can go talk to your kids afterwards at various ages and ask them some questions, which are get some interesting answers. I'm getting to look at that. I have a couple of millennials that are now parents that it's interesting to watch some of their changes. I've got some granddaughters. One of them, I guess, would fit is a Zer. Z generation, because she's a little bit older. I've got a great granddaughter that's 6 years old. And listening to the things that come out of their mouths, listening to the things that they say. A 5-year-old that is just brilliant, and she doesn't miss much. They're sponges. They absorb, they observe, and she's still deciding what she's going to be, and it varies from superhero to firefighter, and I told her those are the same thing. But she talks about all the various things that she wants to do in life, and I'm hoping that she'll help change the world. You've got a brand new grandson.
Yes.
You have some of those same hopes for for what's going to happen with him.
Absolutely.
When we were chatting, you said someone asked you if he was going to be a firefighter, and you pointed out those husky arms, destined to be a truckie.
As I said, I can't say what he's going to be, but I'll assure that he will know about who we are and what we do and why we chose to do it, whether we're career, volunteer, wildland, part pay. We all make the commitment. We all take the oath to protect our communities and save lives and property. And that's what he'll learn about.
And Chief Rubin's grandchildren, if I were to say that he spoils them, that would be a gross understatement, because he spoils them at every single opportunity, just as a granddad should. And he is so proud of his children and his grandchildren.
Chief, I'll tell you, if I knew how much enjoyment grandchildren would bring, I know I would have had them first.
Oh, hell yeah.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So coming
feed them
this
sugar
summer,
and give them back.
Absolutely. Coming this summer at Wingspread, Johnson Foundation has extended invitations to some pretty impressive folks. We're going to have several of the largest communities in America, Metro Chiefs there. I think a total of 3. I think it's 5 PhDs, 1 MD, the United States Fire Administrator, and just a whole host of people that have the breadth and depth of what our organizations need. The way I describe it, and I'll describe it to them because, again, the logistics hat, I get to sort of set the table while they do the work. But, we're not looking at what the next item is tomorrow or the next day, but a little further down the road. I know that when I went to the University of Maryland, we had one of the classes, Dr. Byris was still active as a professor then, and it talked about what the future might be. And one thing always stuck in my mind, and that is critical vibration. Yes, Bruce, critical vibration. And the discussion was around the fact that if you go back in time, anytime past the dates of the bucket brigade, there hasn't been much change. Of course, the hose is no longer leather. The couplings are no longer hammered onto them. That's gotten somewhat of an improvement, but the general overall ideas, rivets is what I was trying to remember. The overall idea, though, is nothing really has changed. So what one of the professors put together was a graphic, and that graphic was what looked like a fire truck, but from the backside, it was a tuning fork. It had no hose lines. And the idea was, if we can determine what that critical vibration is, it'll separate the flames from the combustible material and the fire will go out. That's the kind of thinking that we want to hear. That's the folks, not what the past pandemic has done, but what does the future look like? And I just have to get this in because Bruce just skimmed right over it and then didn't give me a chance to react. But remember, he said there was cartoons.
Yes.
The coolest one of that era of him using the hairdryer was Bruce as Boss Hogg. It was absolutely, positively stunning and amazing. So much so, Chief Brunacini put it into the Fireground Commander slideshow. Am I wrong, Bruce?
No, you are absolutely right.
And it's funny because when you told that story, the first thing that popped to me was, gee, I wonder what Paul Combs would have done with that.
Oh, I would love to have Paul Coombs do something with that. And it's funny you should mention Paul Coombs. You look at Paul's work, and he has the ability to capture what's going on very, very pungent, to the point, and get a message across using cartooning. There have been several very, very successful fire cartoonists. Pony Dunes, Harold Pickering, who was the cartoonist that drew the cartoon that Dennis just spoke of, and a lot of the cartoons that you see in B-Shifter and that were done in the Fireground Commander program were all done by Harold Pickering. So Harold was a Phoenix firefighter, very, very talented artist, and he would put things on the whiteboard at Station 1. And unfortunately, this was before cell phone cameras, so I'd occasionally get a call, Bruce, get down here and take a picture of this. I did it about 3 years as the fire department photographer in Phoenix. So it was quick, come get a picture of this before somebody erases it. And sometimes it was just little exchanges between the shifts that needed to be memorialized.
And you know, going back to that event with the hair dryer, Chief Brunacini, the discussion with Bruce, the pictures, one thing that grew out of that again, I think embodies Wingspread is soon after, and I think I've got the era correct, Bruce, pumpers began being, ladder trucks as well, began being delivered in Phoenix with a speedometer on the officer side. So I think the message was, and I'm stealing his thunder, and I'm trying to pause so he can jump in there. But I think when Chief Brunacini, through the work of Bruce, realized, damn, we're a little out of bounds here, we're out of control. The idea was to tell the officer what, Bruce?
You're responsible for the apparatus. You're responsible for the actions. And you're responsible for following the regulations that have been developed. And those weren't developed in a closet and then sent out. Those were developed by a team of members of the Phoenix Fire Department that had across ranks, across experiences, to say we need to change how we drive. And like I said, those very driving regulations can be found in departments all over this country.
No, and, at the captain's quarterly, I think one of the captains said, okay, now that we got a speedometer, give us a break.
Dennis, we in the interest of time, first of all, Steve, I have provided a link in the chat that is the link to every one of the Wingspread documents for Wingspread 1 through 6 that's available through the National Fire Heritage Center. And they've been very gracious in hosting that on their site. So anyone can go read any one of those documents. We encourage people to read them all. This is Wingspread 6, of course, and it was distributed across the fire service. We will do the same thing with Wingspread 7. It also includes the highlights of every one of the previous Wingspread conferences, because we think that these have helped shape the fire service moving forward. They've identified things that they've all been tried to be forward thinking. They've tried to look at what's coming in the future. What do we need to be looking at today for tomorrow, for 5 years from now, for 10 years from now? What's going to be happening? And get those out there. And it's really been good to see organizations that have looked at the Wingspread documents, that have expanded on them. These are not standalone conclusions, here, go do this. These are food for thought. How do you take this thought, expand on it, use it for the fire service, use it to make fire and emergency services better, use it to better deliver emergency medical services, use it to better build cooperation between organizations. I've talked about the Institution of Fire Engineers. It's based in the UK. Take a look at the UK Fire Service, at the consolidations that have gone on in the UK over the last, mostly since World War II is when it started. Those consolidations post-World War II were significant. And in the last 10 years have been very significant to how they deliver services. Traditionally, that's a country that fire services didn't deliver EMS. In brigades today in the UK, they are delivering first response EMS. And they're going back and they're looking at things that we've done. There's copies of the Wingspread document in the library at the Institution of Fire Engineers. There's copies at the National Fire Academy for the UK at Morton and Marsh. So they look at things that we've done. We look at things that they do. There's great opportunities to take this information and build upon it. And we've recently seen some documents where they mention the very things that were brought out in the last Wingspread conference.
Wow.
And they build on them.
Chief Varner, speak to the Canadian representative that will be in residence during the 3 days of Wingspread.
Did you confirm him?
Well, the only thing that could hold up would be he is confirmed.
Okay.
If the great nation of Canada will allow citizens to travel to the U.S., right? If it happened today, no. I'm hoping by August that he'll be with us. And
again, here's the Canadian Fire Service taking a look at something that we've done that some of their leadership believes is important to look at. Could they create a similar type conference within the Canadian Fire Service, within the great nation of Canada to our north, and build upon that to help with forward thinking within Canada, across Canada.
Very exciting. And again, I think that's the type of reach that the Johnson Foundation has and will continue to have for years yet to come.
Yeah.
I am occasionally surprised by visiting with people at some of the things that come out. The Wingspread conferences, I was, during my term as international chief, international president for IFE, I got to do some travel before COVID. I got to do a lot of travel by Zoom afterwards, but the physical travel before COVID allowed me to interact with people in various parts of the world. I was in Malaysia, and then because of proximity, right after that, I was in Singapore. I met with the current and the two previous chiefs of Malaysian Fire Service, which is a national fire service. And all three of them, in different ways, mentioned Alan Brunacini to me. The current one also mentioned the Wingspread conference documents that he found very interesting to read. So we look at our reach. When I was in Singapore, again, Chief Brunacini was mentioned by the current and the immediate past president of IFE Singapore, as I'm meeting with them and participating with them through their conference. And just the reach that he has had across the world. I'll digress just very, very briefly. Right after Fire Command came out, within the first couple of years, a guy calls him up, and he's in Puerto Rico. No, he was in staying up all night messes with your mind. Central America, and he said, "Could we translate this to Spanish?" What does Bruno say? Sure, go ahead. That became their operational guideline for the entire country in how they commanded fires.
Pretty amazing when you think about it. And, you know, I would also say that Wingspread has often been imitated. However, it has never been duplicated. When you spend 1 minute on the campus, I think you begin to get some understanding of what the impact is. The setting is amazing. Bruce mentioned it. The main house was built by Frank Lloyd Wright, his design, but because of the wealth of the Johnson family, he physically was in residence while it was being built. And since 1939, it was turned over to the foundation, which of course it's property of today, the Johnson Foundation. And to say that they've built a retreat second to none in America that just allows you to escape from telephones and pagers and everything in between, and to focus on the work at hand is an understatement. It's on the shores of Lake Michigan. It has its own lighthouse as an example. I don't know the size of the site, but it's tremendous. And you have to get an aerial view because, of course, the layout of the building is an eagle spread, wing spread. Pretty amazing, my friend. Pretty amazing.
I remember that Chief Bruno, when he was on the show, talked about that it was an amazing place to have the conference simply because of its location, and it allowed people to be there to think what's going on there and kind of empty their minds of everything else that's going on in the world around them so they could concentrate. And again, when you think of a person of his stature saying that about a conference location and what it affords to the attendees at such an important conference, that just brings it up, kicks it up a notch, as a chef says.
Without a doubt. And what I also found extremely interesting is Wingspread I got together in 66, as Bruce mentioned, but it was February. I don't know if you're familiar with the middle part of Wisconsin in February, but it's brutal. It's no getting around it. Well, of course, when I took over logistics, we had to move that to August. So the weather is absolutely delightful. The setting is amazing. And again, I think we get every bit of knowledge, skills, and abilities out of the wonderful, wonderful 30 plus people that have been invited to such an honor to be able to lead us for the next 5 years.
You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to take a quick break here. And when we come back, because I already know some of this from Wingspread VI, but I'd like you to share with our viewers and listeners exactly, it's not just fire people who come to the conference. We talked about Dr. Augustine, who's been a guest on the show, did a great podcast as we were breaking into the pandemic. Thanks to you, Chief Rubin.
You'll hurt his feelings, though. He served for me as an assistant chief in Washington, D.C., which is Fort Trumpets, and a deputy chief, which is Fort Trumpets in Atlanta. He is a firefighter through and through, and he'll tell you that's how he worked his way through medical school, was being a part-time firefighter EMT. So he has that background, and again, he wouldn't be happy with you right now, Steve.
No, I'm saying how great he was. That's what I'm saying was, but you're bringing medical people in. There are some other people that come in that I want our listeners and viewers to know about. That this conference takes on. This is not just a bunch of firefighters getting together.
Excellent.
It's much more important than that, and we have a lot of important people coming there. So, folks, if you're watching the video, you won't see anything different. If you're listening to the audio, we'll be right back right after these words with my guests, Chief Rubin and Chief Varner, right after this. Please stay tuned. And welcome back to this special episode of 5 Alarm Task Force with my guests, Chief Dennis Rubin and Chief Bruce Varner. And they are the chairs, the logistics keys of the upcoming Wingspread VII conference that will be taking place this summer, sometime in August, at the Johnson Foundation's Wingspread Conference Center, as the Chief just told us, on the shores of Lake Michigan. I've been lucky enough to spend 10 fall seasons up in the Appleton area, where I worked at a synagogue there for 10 years for the high holidays. And to be up there in that area during the fall is just amazing. Between the color of the leaves and the animal life that comes out in the fields when you're driving to people's homes where I was invited for dinner and stuff like that, it's just gorgeous. And to think that the conference is going to be right there on the shores of Lake Michigan in August, it's got to be a great place for a lot of great people. And as we were closing up that first segment, we talked about some of the people who are going to be there. But from what you taught me, you and late Chief Bruno taught me after Wingspread VI, that it's not just fire and EMS people who come to these. We have a broad, we paint with a broad stroke of great people who can come and contribute to the thought process that's going to take place at this conference. As you've both stressed, that we're looking ahead. We're not looking for 2022. We're looking for what's going to happen between now and maybe 2027, maybe 2028, maybe getting close to 2030, and how we have to think today about tomorrow, about the tomorrows that are forthcoming, so that we can still protect and do our jobs to the best of our ability by being a little bit ahead of the game.
Absolutely. And All of the folks that are there have some connectivity to the business, but we're going to have an emergency manager, one of the executives from our 50 states. A Fortune 100 company president will be with us. He'll be talking about what we look like in terms of the global economy, what's happening with infrastructure, what should we plan for and prepare for. Believe it or not, we have several scientists. One of the scientists is doing all of the research, not a firefighter, but her dad was, or probably still is, but doing all the research as it relates to health and wellness from a mental perspective. We have a couple of other business folks that have support work involving the fire service, not to bring out their products, but the ones that are looking forward in product development that may make some breakthroughs and help us. So it's going to be about 30 people. It's going to be an exceptionally diverse audience. We're going to have some of the best and brightest. And then, of course, there's me. But other than me, that again, I get to pass out the water bottles. They're really brilliant people that I know will make an impact. One of the things that again, Chief Varner had just teed up perfectly was to give you an example from 6. If you go to that very first significant issue in American Fire Service, American Fire and EMS Service, it deals with violence. And about 3, maybe 4 years after it was reported by Wingspread, NFPA developed a committee to put together NFPA Standard 3000 that deals with active shooter / violence that we respond to. That's the type of work we want to do. I think it stimulated some interest. Had there been attacks on firefighters before? Oh my gosh, yes. But I don't think it had made it to the printed word. Again, often imitated. I don't know if Bruce wants to comment, but never duplicated has been the work of Wingspread. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce?
Absolutely, I would agree. And when we look at the statements, you delve into them. You look at the background where this is coming from. You look at some action plan steps and that are published with the document. Well, these aren't just take this and run with it. This is, again, look at it, think about it. How can you utilize this information? Is it something that's valuable to your organization? Is it something that needs to be taken further and really begin to develop solutions for this statement of national significance? And these are opinions of the people that came together, that come together. Are there others out there? Of course there are. Are there other things that will probably be considered that won't make it to a final report? Sure, of course there are. But this is a consensus of everyone that came together to produce these statements and carry them forward, take them out to the fire service. Dennis, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is how we're able to do that. And we've talked about the Johnson Foundation, and without the Johnson Foundation, we simply couldn't bring this together. They are an absolute key to the success of Wingspread, and even in the years where they didn't invite Wingspread to campus, they allowed their name to be used, which is absolutely significant. But you don't put on something like this without having a few dollars to do it. And again, I've held up the document, and I'm just going to hold it up real quick. There's a sponsor page on there, and you'll certainly see a couple of names that you recognize, like VFIS, for instance, the Fierro Group, and joining us this time around is the Eastern Fire Chiefs.
Southeastern.
Southeastern Fire Chiefs, excuse me, the Southeastern Fire Chiefs, with a significant contribution to help us with all of the expenses that are above and beyond. Lion Foundation is another one that's joining us. Fiero repeating, IFE not only repeating with some funding, but also allowing me as the business manager to take care of the finances, collecting money and redistributing that money. So there's a group of people that have also said, we recognize the importance of this, and we want to support it. And we've been very, very pleased with that support. I'll also use that as an ad. If you're interested in supporting, get in touch with me. We still have a few expenses to meet, and certainly our plan for distribution of the document continues on. Last time we were able to mail them to virtually everyone that requested. They went to the training directors in all of the states. They went to key members of Congress through the Congressional Fire Services Forum and Caucus, excuse me. And we will do all of that again, but we want to even expand on that. We would like to put a copy of the document in the hands of every congressional member, so that if there's a reference to fire service, they can take a look at that document. Many of them have staffers, so we want to get it in the staffers' hands so that they can ask questions when they have fire chiefs that come in. They can ask questions about it, about perhaps how it relates. And simply getting it out across to the fire services, across fire and emergency services across our entire country. We'll do that electronically. We'll post it on the Fire Heritage Center website, so it will join the other documents. Is a living document and be available for anyone that wants to look at it.
You know, you made a very important definition a moment ago, which I think bears repeating, that it's important for our listeners and viewers to understand that this is not a bull session where a bunch of people come around the country and say, well, this is going on in my city and this is bad, and what can you do about it? This is about national significance. This is not just about localities. This is what's going to affect our nation as the job that we do as firefighters, paramedics, EMS, law enforcement, et cetera, and how we need to be able to learn, to grow, and adapt for what's going to happen in the future. And I think they need to know that this is not just a bunch of, a rah-rah convention that people can go to and listen to 2 classes, then go out to the bars and start drinking. This is really something that's based upon what we need to protect the lives and property of this country.
It is indeed, it's very, very intense in that being at the campus, and we've talked about that, all the things that being at the campus affords you, but it also affords the opportunity for discussions to continue over dinner, through the evening, into breaks, because you are brought together in this really magnificent place to do just that, to have a discussion and come up with some ideas and results that can be shared with the fire services of our nation, and certainly of others around the world that are interested.
Yeah, very true.
I would say also, you mentioned about some of the discussion. One of the house rules, and I'm the house rule boss, says no war stories. So firefighters not being able to tell war stories, that cuts our ability about in half. We can we can double the amount of work. And I just happen to have a police officer that works as our treasurer, and that would be Boss Hogg. So again, we really limit looking back, and we only focus on looking forward. And I know we've probably ran long in your session, but I just like to quickly cover the fact that we start off with a statement of significance. What is it? we make that statement of significance go through 5 different reviews before it gets considered. Once that happens, then we rate the background. Not an easy task. Why? Why is that a significant statement? And then the last piece is that they have to develop an action plan. Whoever is the parents, the mom or the dad of that particular statement. The headlines ends up being, if you will, the significant statement. The background ends up being the story below the column, and sort of the finite details, the statistics, the analysis looks like the action plan. And that's how we'll continue to pursue to do business. We feel like it's a comprehensive way of doing reporting, and it's really important to us. And again, it goes through 5 levels of review before it gets considered. Most likely there'll be somewhere between 7 to 15. I don't think it'll be any less than 7 and no more than 15 strategic statements of significance. But they've all been pretty impactful from day one.
That's interesting to hear, because I think, again, once it gives respite to the thought of people who really don't know about these conferences, their importance, the value, the basically incalculable value that they hold for not just those of us who serve in emergency services, but for our communities.
Yes.
And the communities may
Yes.
not know about it, but we who are out there to protect them, we do know about it, or need to know about it and learn about it once the reports are published. And that should be as much of a learning goal for every firefighter and medic and rescue technician out there in this country, and in our brothers and sisters in Canada and the UK as well, that when this gets published, that should be part of their curriculum. That should be on the syllabus of what they have to learn for themselves to be a better emergency service worker.
And, to go back to Bruce's comments about folks asking for the reports, we see a lot of higher education learning institutions asking for electronic copies, asking for paper copies. Last printing, I think it was over 15,000 that we produced, which doesn't sound like a lot, but of course, Bruce had to raise all that money, and it wasn't cheap.
But the electronic version is readily available and will be readily available as soon as this document is published. It will be available electronically, and we will put that word out to anyone and everyone. As I mentioned, it will also reside with the other documents at the National Fire Heritage Center. Is where the plan is for that to reside currently.
Right. And that gives great access to the everyday firefighter and paramedic and police officer and whoever else does emergency services. It gives them an easy way. They can sit down at their own time, pull up the document, read it through, and listen to what some of these great leaders in their professions come together to discuss. That's going to make, when you think that we have the younger people just coming up with this new generation of the fire service, you have the medium ones who are middle of the way, you have some of the older ones who are the senior members in the house, and then you have those who have left. Well, let's be honest. The 3 of us know for sure that though we often leave the structure, we never really leave the service. It stays with us because it's who we are. And I'd be very surprised if we don't have many of our former brothers and sisters who can't wait to tear into the document when it's published, whether it's paper or electronic, so they can still learn. Because if they've been successful throughout their careers, it's all because they were committed to continue to learn from the moment they entered that academy to the day they had the bash and waved it and gave them a tip of the hat. And they still want to learn, because that's
We'll have
who we are.
several retired people there. The retired fire chief of Santa Rosa, California. We'll have the retired fire chief and commissioner of New York City. And both told me that if they weren't in line to be participants, of course, one of them's a treasurer, that I would probably lose my knees or something. So I think you're right. I think it's hard to break away from the business that we're in completely and totally without trying to continue to be a contributor. So it's just really going to be, I think, another wonderful experience in Racine, Wisconsin.
Well, the best thing is I see that with many of my guests, the two of you. Chief Varner, you've just never stopped. It's
Never
always
stops.
been who you are and defined you. Articles in every trade that we have, stories from you. Chief Rubin, you've been a good friend and supporter since we connected in 2016, and I followed you since then. You're in a great one of my near and dear cities, Philadelphia, right outside the city of Philadelphia. We have family in Montgomery County, so I know the area very well. Lots of visits up there. As you know, Chief Rubin, our dramatic series was based. The pilot script that I shared with you was based in the Philadelphia Fire Department. Chief Varner, I'll send it out to you as well for your enjoyment and love to hear your feedback on it.
Brilliant read, sir. Brilliant read.
Thank you. And you've always been out there on social media to promote better things in the fire service. And Chief Vance and Billy Chief Bruncini, and he just never stopped being a firefighter until that last day at the airport. And until that last moment, he was still a firefighter. We know
Absolutely.
that. He was still a firefighter. And I'm sure if there was anybody going to be posted upstairs as the chief of the Heavenly Department, it was going to be Chief Bruno.
No doubt about that.
Steve, I'd like to just do a quick shout out here. Is my maternal grandfather was a foreman on the Raleigh, North Carolina Volunteer Fire Department, and was one of the members asked to come over as a captain in the paid fire department when Raleigh became a paid fire department. So shout out to Raleigh, North Carolina Fire Department, where my grandfather served. Unfortunately, I never knew him. He passed away long before I was ever born, but I know a little bit about him. I think there's probably some of that caused me to take the path that I took. I know he was very dedicated to that organization, and so I think there's probably just a little bit of that goes with me.
Great heritage, sir. Great heritage. That's it.
Well, thank you for having us on this evening. I truly appreciate it. I think we got the message out loud and clear. I don't know if Bruce has any other information to share.
Just thank you, Steve. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and thank you for hosting us. Again, congratulations on your new grandson. That's just going to be a lot of fun.
It has been already just 2 weeks. I'm looking forward to everything else that comes with it. Thank you for choosing to make the announcement here on our show. It means a great deal to us, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to having both of you back sometime subsequent to the conference, so you can tell us a little bit about it. I know that it takes a while for everything to be digested and put out in paper, but we'd like to hear some of your reactions to how you feel it went smoothly. We had 2 thunderstorms while we were there, so we didn't get to do this, whatever. But I think our listeners would love to hear a little bit more about it. And then for sure, once the report is released, we definitely want to have you both back.
I will make a commitment to come back if we can tell the Nash Rambler story next time.
There were no cell phone cameras. There is no.
For the record, I love Bruce Varner. That's the truth.
And
getting to hang out with him and Chief Brunicini, what a treat of a lifetime.
You cannot prove that ever happened, Rube.
I heard it from the Chief's lips. I know it's true.
Oh, all right. We'll have to leave that one up. That might come up in the report. Who knows? You never know. There's a little pen scratch in the last page of the.
Probably not.
Great evening. Thank you both so very, very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both very much. I appreciate you taking extra time today, Chief, after a full day of work, and Chief Varner making time. I know you've got some family issues that you're dealing with, and your relatives in our prayers, hearts and minds and prayers. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So very much. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. It was a pleasure to have you back. Folks, this will be the end of the video. If you're listening to the audio, we're going to be right back right after these words. As always, please stay tuned.